United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
May 2nd, 2011, 12:30 a.m. Two stealth helicopters slip across the border at treetop level, invisible to radar, undetectable to a country that has no idea they're coming. Inside one of them sit 23 of the most lethal men alive. They are 90 seconds from the most wanted terrorist in human history. Then, disaster. The lead helicopter loses lift. It slams into the wall of Osama bin Laden's hideout. The mission's secrecy collapses in a single second. What happened inside those walls over the next 38 minutes is one of the most classified operations in American history. This is the uncensored story of SEAL Team 6 taking down Osama bin Laden. Before SEAL Team 6 ever stepped onto a helicopter, the CIA had a very embarrassing problem. After tracking a courier named Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti across the Gulf states, they had followed him to a strange 3-story compound in Abbottabad, a wealthy garrison town in northern Pakistan. 18-foot walls, barbed wire along the top, no telephone line or internet. The residents burned their garbage in the yard instead of putting it out for collection, and every single morning, a very tall, thin man walked in slow circles inside the courtyard, but never once stepped outside the gate. The analysts gave him a code name. They called him the Pacer. The problem was they could not prove who he was. The CIA's Red Team, brought in for a final reality check, told the president flat out the odds that this Pacer was bin Laden were only 50-50, a coin flip. Obama was not going to send American operators into another country's sovereign territory on a coin flip. They needed proof. They needed DNA. So the CIA did something that to this day still has people arguing about it. They recruited a Pakistani surgeon named Dr. Shakil Afridi and handed him a budget. They told him to run a fake hepatitis B vaccination program in Abbottabad. To make it look real, Afridi started in a poor neighborhood, vaccinating dozens of children for free. Then, very suspiciously, he packed up his nurses and his coolers and moved the entire operation across the city to Bilal Town, the wealthy neighborhood where the mysterious compound sat. His nurses went door to door offering free shots. The plan was simple. Vaccinate the children inside that compound. Keep the used needles. Pull trace blood from them. Then run that DNA against a sample the CIA had quietly obtained months earlier from one of bin Laden's own sisters who had died in a hospital in Boston in 2010. A nurse actually got inside the gate. She gave injections, walked out with the needles, but the DNA test never produced a clean match. The family kept the kids away from the gate and the samples were degraded. The operation, in the strictest sense, failed. Dr. Afridi paid the price anyway. After the raid, Pakistan arrested him for treason and sentenced him to 33 years in prison. He is still locked up today, and the fallout was catastrophic. The Taliban began murdering polio vaccine workers, 16 of them in a single year, mostly women. Polio, which had nearly been wiped out, came roaring back. But here is the part that mattered. Even though the DNA test failed, the surveillance kept building. Satellites watched the compound day and night. A safe house was rented directly across the street. The Pacer kept pacing. Obama got the brief. The intelligence would never be 100%. It would never even be 90%. The president had to decide, wait, or act. He had 3 options on his desk. 2 of them would never confirm a kill. Only one would put American boots inside Pakistan. The first option was a B-2 stealth bomber. 32 bombs dropped from 60,000 feet would have leveled the entire compound in seconds. The problem was, it would also have leveled half the neighborhood. Civilian casualty estimates ran north of 30 dead, and there would be no body, no DNA. No way to prove to the world that the man underneath all that rubble had actually been bin Laden. Obama killed the idea. The second option was a precision drone strike. Cleaner, quieter, smaller blast radius, but the same fatal flaw. Without a body and a face, the United States will be standing in front of cameras the next morning saying, "Trust us, we think we got him." Obama would not accept that. That left the third option: send men in. Land helicopters in the middle of a Pakistani city, breach the walls, clear the buildings room by room, and walk back out with proof. It was the only path to certainty. It was also the most dangerous military operation any president had authorized in 30 years. Two ghosts were sitting at that table with him. The first was Operation Eagle Claw, 1980, Jimmy Carter's attempt to rescue American hostages from Iran. 8 servicemen burned alive in the desert when a helicopter collided with a transport plane. The mission destroyed Carter's presidency. The second was Black Hawk Down, Mogadishu, 1993. 18 American soldiers dead, their bodies dragged through the streets on live television. Robert Gates, the defense secretary in the room, was the only person at that table who had personally lived through Eagle Claw. He argued against the raid. Joe Biden was skeptical. Hillary Clinton said go. Obama walked out without giving an answer. While the president was thinking, the machine was already moving. At Harvey Point, North Carolina, the CIA quietly built a full-scale replica of the Abbottabad compound. Same 18-foot walls, internal staircase, and locked steel door on the second floor. A second mock-up was built in the Nevada desert specifically to test the helicopters at high altitude. SEAL Team 6 rehearsed the assault more than 100 times. Not a single operator told his wife. Not one told his teammates back at base. They were given a cover story about a training exercise. The planners built something they called the playbook, a 3-inch binder of contingencies. What if Pakistani F-16 scrambled and tried to shoot the helicopters down on the way out? What if bin Laden had a tunnel? What if a Pakistani army patrol stumbled onto the raid in progress? Every nightmare scenario had a page. Every page had a response. And then, the night before the helicopters lifted off, President Obama did something that in hindsight is almost impossible to believe. He put on a tuxedo and walked into the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He stood at the podium and cracked jokes for 20 minutes while across the world, in a hangar in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, the SEALs were already loading magazines. Pakistan was kept completely in the dark. The advisors agreed unanimously one phone call to the ISI, and bin Laden would be gone within an hour. Sunday, May 1st. Moonless night. Wheels up. At 11 o'clock at night local time, 2 specially modified MH-60 Blackhawks lifted off from a runway in Jalalabad, Afghanistan. These were not normal helicopters. They were stealth-modified, rotor blades reshaped to reduce noise, body-coated in radar-absorbing material, tail redesigned. They were so classified that the United States military officially denied their existence. Most people in the Pentagon did not know they had been built. Inside the first bird, 12 SEALs. Inside the second, 11 SEALs, a Pashto-speaking translator codenamed Ahmed, wearing a shower camise over his flak jacket to blend in with locals, and a Belgian Malinois named Cairo. Cairo was a veteran of multiple raids. He wore his own body armor, his own night vision goggles, and a set of titanium teeth. The pilots flying these aircraft were the Night Stalkers, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the only unit in the world authorized to fly missions of this type. They flew so low that one SEAL later said he could see goats on the ground passing underneath them. The cockpit radio chatter was caught on tape. One pilot is heard saying, very quietly, "Boy, this is a little hairy here." They crossed the Pakistani border at treetop altitude, weaving between mountain ridges to stay under the radar. Inside the White House Situation Room, every senior official in American national security was crammed into a small conference room watching a silent drone feed. President Obama, Vice President Biden, Secretary Clinton, CIA Director Panetta, Defense Secretary Gates, just a wall-mounted screen and the soft hum of the air conditioning. 90 minutes after liftoff, the helicopters were directly over the compound. The first bird, carrying the assault element, came into a hover above the courtyard. The plan was simple. 12 SEALs were going to fast rope down from the hover onto the dirt inside the walls in about 90 seconds. Then, everything went wrong. The air above the compound was hotter and thinner than anyone had predicted. Worse, the high walls disrupted the airflow under the rotors, something engineers call a vortex ring state. The Black Hawk lost lift in mid-hover. The pilot felt the bird sliding sideways. He tried to pull up. The tail rotor clipped the top of the 18-foot wall. The helicopter came down hard, listing onto one skid inside the courtyard, engine screaming. Inside the Situation Room, every face went white. Panetta later said it felt like the entire mission had just died. The footage was silent. They could see the helicopter going down, but they could not hear anyone. Could not see any operators moving, did not know if any SEALs had survived the crash. For almost a full minute, nobody in that room breathed. Then Vice Admiral William McCraven came back on the radio from his command post in Jalalabad. He said one sentence, "Guys are fine," modifying the plan. Outside the compound walls, CIA case officers in plain clothes were already moving. They knocked on neighbors' doors in fluent Urdu and ordered them to kill the lights and stay inside. The CIA simultaneously cut power to the entire block of Bilal Town. The whole neighborhood went pitch black. Plan A, the fast rope onto the roof, was dead. The SEALs were going in on foot, from the ground, through every gate. Breaching charges went on the outer wall. The charge detonated, and SEALs Team 6 was inside. The first building they hit was the guest house, a small one-story structure near the front gate. This was where Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti lived, the courier whose phone call months earlier had cracked the entire case open. Kuwaiti heard the explosions. He grabbed his AK-47, ran to a window and opened fire on the SEALs as they came across the courtyard. The return fire was instant. Kuwaiti dropped. His wife was standing right behind him. She was wounded by ricochets. The SEALs moved on the main house. On the first floor, they ran into Kuwaiti's brother, Abrar Ahmed. Abrar was armed and opened fire. He was killed in the doorway. His wife, standing right next to him, was killed in the crossfire. The team kept moving. They reached the bottom of the staircase and found something the CIA had not expected: a locked steel security door blocking the entire stairwell. Bin Laden's personal barrier. He had built it specifically so that if anyone ever breached the front gate, he would have time to react. The SEALs blew it. They went up the stairs in total darkness, using night vision. The CIA had cut the power. There were no lights anywhere inside the compound. To the SEALs, the world was glowing green. To anyone inside without night vision, the world was black. They reached the second floor landing. And this is the part nobody talks about. The CIA had briefed them weeks earlier with a very specific piece of intelligence. If you find Khalid bin Laden, Osama's 23-year-old son, Osama is on the next floor up. So as the stack of SEALs paused on the landing, the point man did something brilliant and brutal. In fluent Arabic, he whispered into the darkness. Just one word, twice. Khalid. Khalid bin Laden was hiding behind the banister with an AK-47 in his hands. He heard his name. He was confused. He thought it was one of his cousins. He leaned out around the corner and answered, "Naam?" "Yes." A single shot. He dropped. The SEAL stepped over his body. They flowed up the final staircase, third floor. A curtain hung across the doorway at the top of the stairs. The point man, the lead SEAL whose name remains classified, known inside the unit only as Red, saw a tall bearded head poke out from behind the curtain for half a second. He raised his rifle. He fired twice. The head disappeared behind the curtain. Was it him? Nobody on that staircase knew. Not yet. In the Situation Room, CIA Director Panetta was narrating what little he could see from the drone overhead. And then, for 15 to 20 agonizing minutes, the radio went silent. Nobody in the White House knew what was happening inside that bedroom. And here is what almost no one will tell you. Every SEAL on that mission was wearing a helmet camera. Every step of that raid was being recorded. The live feed was streaming back to CIA headquarters in Langley. That footage exists today. It has never been released. Not 1 second of it has ever been shown to the American public. Outside the compound, something else was happening. A resident of Abbottabad, an IT consultant named Sohaib Athar, had been kept awake by the noise. He had no idea what was going on. He picked up his phone and started typing on Twitter. Helicopter hovering above Abbottabad at 1 a.m. is a rare event. He was, without knowing it, live tweeting the most secret operation in American military history. Inside the compound, the SEALs pushed through the curtain at the top of the stairs, and then they saw him. The bedroom was low-ceilinged and cluttered. A mattress on the floor, two terrified women screaming in Arabic, and in the middle of the room, a tall man, 6 feet 4 inches, was lying on the floor, bleeding. On a shelf, within easy arm's reach of where he had been standing, was an AK-47. Next to it, a Russian Makarov 9mm pistol. He had not touched either weapon. Sources who debriefed the SEALs later said bin Laden had acted, in their exact word, cowardly. In his final moments, he had shoved his youngest wife, Amal, a Yemeni woman in her 20s, toward the SEALs as a human shield. Amal then did something extraordinary. She charged the shooter herself, screaming. The SEAL shot her in the leg to stop her. And now we come to the part that, 15 years later, still divides SEAL Team 6. Robert O'Neill, who wrote the book The Operator, says he was second in the stack behind the point man. He says he walked into the bedroom, saw bin Laden standing upright next to the bed and fired 2 rounds, one to the chest and one to the head, just above the left eye. Matt Bissonette, who wrote No Easy Day under the pseudonym Mark Owen, tells it differently. He says the point man's shots from the stairwell had already dropped bin Laden before O'Neill ever entered the room. A third anonymous SEAL told The Intercept years later that bin Laden was already bleeding out on the floor when O'Neill arrived, and that O'Neill simply walked over and put the final 2 rounds into his skull as he lay there. The Defense Department has never confirmed who fired the killing shot. What is agreed by every account is that Osama bin Laden was killed in that bedroom by SEAL Team 6. Over the radio, the team leader keyed his mic. For God and country, Geronimo. Geronimo, EKIA enemy killed in action. In the Situation Room, Obama exhaled. He said 3 words, "We got him." But the raid was not over. 19 minutes had passed since the breach. They had 19 minutes left before Pakistani jets could be expected to scramble. The SEALs went to work. They stripped the compound of every piece of intelligence they could carry. Hard drives, USB sticks, bin Laden's handwritten personal journal, letters to his deputies, and a stash of strange items the intelligence community is still cagey about today, flash drives loaded with Disney films and the video game Counter-Strike, plus a collection of pornography that nobody has ever publicly explained. They blew the crashed Black Hawk into slag with thermite charges so the stealth technology would not fall into anyone's hands. But the tail rotor section, which had been outside the main fuselage, survived the blast intact. Pakistan held it for weeks. According to multiple reports, Chinese military engineers were eventually allowed to inspect it. Bin Laden's body went into a bag. The bag went on to the second helicopter. The team flew out 38 minutes. That is how long it took to end the 10-year manhunt. The body was flown first to Bagram Air Base for facial recognition and DNA matching. 99.9% certainty. From there it went to the deck of the USS Carl Vinson, an aircraft carrier sitting in the Arabian Sea. Military officials washed the body in salt water according to Islamic tradition. They wrapped it in a white sheet. They placed it in a weighted bag. The bag was laid on a flat board which was tipped up, and the body of the man who had killed nearly 3,000 people on September 11, 2001, slid silently into the sea before sunrise. Fewer than a dozen sailors on that entire aircraft carrier knew it had happened. Days later, President Obama flew to Fort Campbell to meet the team that had pulled it off. Somebody in the room asked the obvious question, "Which one of you actually shot him?" The SEALs looked at each other, and then they answered, in unison, the only way special operators ever answer that question. "We all did, sir." Before he left, they handed the president a folded American flag. On the back was an inscription, hand-stitched by the team. It read, Operation Neptune Spear, May 1st, 2011. For God and country, Geronimo. That flag now hangs in the White House. If this story pulled you in, hit the subscribe button. There is a lot more like this coming.